I'd love to just dive right into your book. And you began the Harvard Thucydides trap project and wrote this book about just the basis is there are 16 cases in the world where a rising power has threatened a ruling power. And I'd love to just start on the top of, in writing and in reading and in setting up this the center, what have your kind of key takeaways been from the 16 cases where this happened and call it the 12 that ended up at war and the 4 that didn't?
Well, let me start with the big idea and then we'll drill down.
Great.
So basically, Thucydides had a big idea. So Thucydides, the founder and father of history, was watching what happened in classical Greece 2,500 years ago. And he wrote famously, it was the rise of Athens and the fear that this instilled in Sparta that caused the war. So there's a concept that a rising disruptor and an established incumbent end up in a rivalry that often leads to war. I then coined this term Thucydides trap to make this concept vivid. And then in the Thucydides trap case project, we looked at the last 500 years. We found 16 times a rising power threatened to displace a ruling power. 12 of them ended in war, 4 in not war. So there's the puzzle. So think next month we'll be celebrating, we'll pause to remember the final day of a war that became so devastating that historians had to create a whole new category. They called it World War. That's why it's World War I.
Yeah.
In that case, a incident as inconsequential, apparently, as the assassination of a minor figure, the Archduke of the Austro-Hungarian Emperor, became the spark that created a fire that burned down the whole of Europe.
Yeah.
So in this series of cases, each one is interestingly different, but as Henry Kissinger has said, there's a lens here for piercing through the noise and news of the day to get the underlying dynamic, what's happening in relations between a rising China and a ruling U.S. Americans are accustomed to being at the top of every pecking order for 100 years. I mean, we call it the American century. So the whole very idea of another country that would be as big and strong as the U.S., or maybe even bigger or stronger, that strikes many Americans as an affront to who we are.
That's right.
So in this dynamic, as Thucydides describes, you get a rising power syndrome in which I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I deserve more say, I deserve more sway. The current arrangements were put in place before I ever got here. Think of Uber and the taxi industry, or think of Google and everybody.
Yeah.
So wait a minute, so we're going to change the rules.